Hi there, Natalie with you today with a new process video, and today I want to show you how you can create unique prints for your memory keeping using the Altenew mixed media inks and a few of the stamps. So come join me. Welcome back. Today I want to show you how you can create monoprints for your memory keeping, and for this you're gonna use the mixed media inks. These inks are great to create in all sorts of things, and one of them is monoprinting, and also a jelly plate. A jelly plate is important because it's gonna help you create the print. Also, you're gonna need some rubber brayers. I'm gonna say you're gonna need at least 2 of them, just because I want to keep it kind of clean for these layouts. You're gonna need stamps. You can use stencils. We're gonna focus on stamps and quite a bit of paper. You're gonna need, in this case, I'm going to use a tag and some Nina cardstock to create the impressions, and some scratch paper to help me clean up my brayer and just, show you how you can create the print easily. So I'm going to start by just showing you how you can create a print. And what a jelly plate is actually a mixture of gelatin and glycerin, and it creates this jello type surface that is think of it as a big ink pad where you are gonna deposit. You can add ink, you can add paint, you can add impressions, and then you're gonna use whatever you created on it to create the print onto a paper. So I'm going to show you how easy it is, just a plain impression to create with the jelly plate. And I'm using the mixed media inks. I'm using Frayed leaf, Forest Glades, and Evergreen, and I'm just going to head and stamp them on top of my 5x7 jelly plate, sorry. And I'm coming in with a brayer, and what the brayer does is I'm just gonna roll it so that I delete or that I erase those lines that the ink pads left behind. So by rolling it, I'm just kind of cleaning it up, and then you're gonna see that I bring a scratch piece of paper. And what I do there is I roll my brayer there just to clean up the excess ink that's on the brayer. Once I'm happy with what it looks like, the impression on the jelly plate, I'm gonna come in with the paper. This is just copy paper, just to show you how it works. I'm gonna lay it on top of my jelly plate, use a brayer just to make sure that I get all the impression that I created on the jelly plate onto the paper, and then I'm gonna lift my paper and then have my monoprint. Easy as that. So for this particular layout, I've already worked my tag outside of the camera, and it's because I didn't realize that I had not turned on the camera. But I'm going to show you the rest of the process. My apologies on that. So I'm starting with creating, I'm going to create pocket pages for using these prints. So I'm going to use, to create the pockets, some of the monoprints. So I'm starting for the second part of this layout. I'm gonna use a little bit of Grapevine and also Frayed, it's not Frayed leaf, Forest Glades, sorry, ink. And I'm gonna stamp it onto my jelly plate, and you're gonna see that I'm coming in with my brayer. I'm just gonna stretch the ink, delete the lines, erase the lines, or delete them, whichever way you wanna call them, off the ink pads. I don't wanna have that line. I wanna kind of fade them, kind of create that transition of the colors. And I realized that once I clean it, it's really light, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more ink. I'm using Forest Glades, and then a little bit more Grapevine, and again I'm gonna come in with my brayer just to kind of fuse the colors together. Once I have that in place, I'm gonna come in with a retro Plantines stamp set, and I'm just gonna stamp one of the leaves. So you're gonna see that I lightly stamp it on my jelly plate, and that pretty much, you're gonna see that the stamp takes off, lifts the ink, so it leaves the impression of the stamp there. I'm gonna come in, this is a piece of cardstock, I'm gonna lay it on top of my jelly plate, and using a brayer, I'm just gonna roll my brayer, and that's when I lift the paper, it has created the impression of the ink with the little impression of the leaf on it. I'm gonna set it aside to dry, and then I'm gonna continue working on the second part of, because I'm creating 2 layouts, so I'm gonna show you how I create the second layout. So for this, I'm gonna focus on the reds and the pinks for this layout. So I'm gonna use Frosty pink and a little bit of Grapevine to create kind of an ombre effect for my page. Now I am using a 5x7 jelly plate. My pages for my little album are 5 by 8 1/4. I just didn't want to bring the bigger jelly plate just because it has a little crack. I accidentally cracked it, so I had to use the small one. So again, I'm starting by stamping some of the colors. I added a bit of the frosty pink at the top and a little bit of the grapevine at the bottom. I'm using my brayer just to make sure that I fuse the colors and create a nice ombre effect. And I'm coming in with the Painted Flower Paeonia Japonica, and I'm just gonna stamp it at the bottom, and that's gonna lift the image of the stamp of the darker part of the impression. And then I'm gonna layer, this is Nina cardstock on top of it. I'm gonna go with my brayer, and that's just gonna make sure that everything that I created on the jelly plate transfer onto the cardstock. And then I have the beautiful background with the white impression of the stamp. And because my paper is a little bit longer than the jelly plate, I'm just gonna mix a little bit of the color and just literally add the little space that is left over, but just adding a little more of the impression of the jelly plate. I don't mind having that line. I love having those little faults that you see in prints. I actually love having that in monoprints. So once I have that, I still have some ink left over from the impression, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more of the frosty pink ink onto my jelly plate. I'm gonna stretch it. I'm gonna come in with the same stamp, that's the Painted Flower Paeonia Japonica. I'm gonna create the impression right on the center of the paper. Again, this is just plain cardstock. I lay it on top of my jelly plate. I'm gonna run brayer on top of it just to bring that impression, and then I'm gonna lift the paper and I have the impression, a very soft impression using the same colors. And I actually love how this turned out, because I know that I'm gonna place my picture on the left just because I have that darker impression, and the ones on the right are gonna become part of my pockets. Now, because I am working with mixed media inks, I have to make sure that they set completely. For that, I have to heat them up. So I'm using my heat gun just to set the inks in place. And then I'm gonna start working on the two layouts. I'm gonna start with part of one and then jump onto the second one, finish it, and then I'm gonna come back. So for the first one, I had this idea that I want to have the picture nestled between the flowers that I created. So to do that, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and just lightly trim the bottom of the flower so that I can sneak the picture underneath. Once I have that in place, I'm going to kind of set up my album the way it's going to sit. And I know that there's going to be a pocket page that's going to divide these two layouts. So for me to be able to work on how everything is gonna sit, I have to make sure that I work them simultaneously, kind of thing. They have to work side by side, so they have to be worked side by side. So because I know that the colors on the autumn page that I'm creating are a little bit darker, I'm gonna start with that so I can arrange the other one accordingly. So what I'm done is, remember that print that I created with the leaf? That's the retro Plantines leaf that I created. I'm gonna go ahead and trim the big sheet of the impression to a 3x4 card, making sure that the leaf stays in the center of the card. Once I have it in place, I'm gonna come in with two stamps. I am using the Autumn Bounty and the Across the Pond stamp set to create my title card. And it's gonna read, Autumn, you are marvelous. And once I have it stamped, I use Obsidian ink to stamp them. I'm gonna come in with a little bit of antique gold metallic ink spray and also a little bit of the jet black ink spray, and I'm just gonna splatter a bit onto the card. I wanna have those little folds that you see on prints. I want to have them on that little card. So by adding a little bit of splatters, it's going to create those little folds on the impression, and I love it. So I'm going to set them aside to dry. I just added a little heart from the Warm and Cozy enamel dots, and I'm going to set it aside to dry and work on the large tag that is going to house my lines of journal. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to add kind of a subtitle, and again I'm going to use the same stamp sets. Those are the Autumn Bounty and the Across the Pond stamp sets, and I'm gonna add a title that reads, Autumn, you are my favorite thing. So I'm adding that right underneath where I poked the hole for my tag, and then after that I'm gonna draw my lines of journal right underneath the title, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and write them. Again, I can go ahead and take them to my typewriter and add them and typed all the lines of journal, but I just wanted to go ahead and write them. There's something about writing your own lines, your own journaling. Maybe because I've written in my journals my entire life, it's not the best handwriting, but I love seeing that. It gives, like, the homemade feel to my pages. So now, just to complete my page, I'm just gonna go ahead and add a little sentiment, and this says grateful for you, and it also comes from the Autumn Bounty stamp set. I'm using black Obsidian ink to add all these titles just because it has that crisp definition that I want. Once I have that ready, I'm gonna go ahead and add a few more splatters just to continue the look that I had in the title card. So again, I'm adding a few splatters of jet black ink and also of metallic antique gold ink spray onto the little tag. I'm gonna heat it with my heat gun just so that it sets in place, and then I'm gonna set it on my album, and that's it. Love how they turn out. I love the fact that it's a unique print, and that's the beauty of a monoprint. You only get one impression out of it. So that's what makes it mono, is a unique impression for your memory keeping. You can use this for cards, so many ideas. Now I'm gonna go back and work on the second part of the layout. So because I already know when I added my splatters, I know that some of the ink seeping through the paper, so I know that to cover that, I cannot put my title there. So I'm gonna have to add my lines or journal on that pocket just because it's gonna have some black. And that's one of the reasons why I said I have to work side by side, kind of in unison, the two layouts. So again, the large print that I created with the soft impression of the stamp, I'm gonna actually trim it into 2 3x4 cards, but this time I'm gonna manipulate the paper so that the impression of the flower sits on the top and the bottom right corners of my 2 cards, so that I have the impression is gonna sit right at the top of my layout, at the bottom of my layout, and it kind of creates a triangle with a large impression of the flower, which is what I want for my layout, just to balance it out. Now in this case, the top card is gonna become my title card. For that, I'm just adding a little bundle of metallic thread. I'm using antique gold for this, so I just bundle it on my finger, put it onto the card, and I'm using double-sided tape to keep it in place. I'm using one of the chipboard stickers from the Enjoy the Ride collection to add the title, and just to bring some shine, just because the impression is so light, I'm gonna bring antique gold sequin, and I'm just gonna scatter a few on my title card. That's about it. You can barely see the print unless you see it up close, but you just have this soft detail on the background. It looks like you made the paper, and that's pretty much what monoprinting is. You're making your own pattern paper. So I have my title, and for the bottom, I think you can see the impression of the flower takes pretty much 3/4 of the bottom of the card. So I'm just gonna add my lines of journal at the top. I drew lines, I'm writing them down with my fine liner, and this is a new product that's coming to Altenew soon. And then I'm just gonna add a little sticker that's from my stash, and I'm gonna add a few more of the sequin just to continue the little pops of gold on my layout. Now I'm gonna go back to the picture. I've already settled it in place. I glue it in place, and I'm gonna come in with the Kind Reminders stamp set. I'm gonna add a title, kind of a subtitle, and it says "Be Your Own Kind of Beautiful." I'm just gonna stamp it with black Obsidian ink on the top of the page. I'm gonna add some sequin there, and then I'm gonna add kind of a sentiment that's right at the bottom of the picture, using the same stamp set that's the Kind Reminders stamp set. And once I add it, I'm gonna add a little heart. This is a resin heart that I had in my stash, and it had that kind of grapevine color and that pinkish tone, and just more sequin, and that's about it. I love how this turned out. It's super fun to create monoprints with a gel print, with a jelly plate. It's so fun. And using the mixed media inks makes it makes it so easy to create, and is easy way to create one of a kind things and papers for your layouts, memory keeping, cards, whichever format you use. I hope you try it. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Remember to check the blog for all the details. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more content. Take care, guys.
Hello crafters, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching.